welcome to Chapter 5. Today we're going to actually do some cutting on the bandsaw. So this would be a bandsaw demonstration. This is largely shot in order to support the materials that I have posted at teacherpayteacher.com. However, for the enthusiast, safety videos are always a good thing to watch, especially if you don't have a background in working with equipment, you've recently retired, and you'd like to get into some woodworking in your retirement. I think there's value for you to watch this. So we're going to get into it fairly quickly today. As you've noticed with the other videos that I've posted on safety themes, safety is a touchy thing to teach. I want to make it clear that the videos that I shoot are what I did in the shop. They are no way designed to be the end-all and be-all on shop safety. And basically for liability, I'd kind of say they're for entertainment purposes. All right? Okay, so let's move on. When I taught industrial arts in the high school, I had a routine that my students went through as they got into the shop. And I think that routine is important when you're working with equipment. First of all, when the students came into the shop, there was a rack of safety glasses right by the door, and they were required to grab a pair, walk through the shop to the sink. Our sink wasn't in the best place, but they washed their glasses with a disinfectant, and excuse me, and then they put them on and they wore them the whole class. That was mandatory. So you had them in the shop, safety glasses on. Those who had longer hair, a lot of the girls would have long hair. Some of the guys did too. But regardless, that didn't matter. It was important to keep that tied up and out of the way. So the shop actually purchased hair ties at Dollarama to make sure that students who forgot theirs had one. They didn't have to run around the school looking for a hair tie, and we could get right to work. So I stocked them all the time, and I appreciated that. I think it was a good thing. When you're talking about clothing in the shop, that's important to mention this as well. You'll notice that I'm standing here with basically a 3/4 inch sleeve on my t-shirt, and I like that. It's a little cool in the shop. It keeps me a little warmer. If you're cold in the shop and you need to put your hoodie on, you need to make sure you can pull the sleeves up. Now, if your hoodie has really nice tight cuffs, that would probably be okay if it fit fairly tight in the arms. But you want to avoid loose dangling things on your arms. So the hoodies where you stick your thumb through the sleeve, please don't wear those. They're dangerous in my opinion in the shop. So a short sleeve shirt is great. But remember to keep your hands free of things that could get caught in equipment. The other important thing while we're talking about your attire is your footwear. Now, when I put all these safety rules together and wrote this all up, every book I looked at mentioned wearing steel-toed, steel-shanked boots. Well, most of my students don't have those. So I came to the point where having them wear shoes that covered their feet worked for me. Remember, this is a decision I made. So sneakers, tennis shoes, whatever. I have one story. I'm going to deviate just a little bit here from the pathway to mention a really, really cool student that I worked with in the last few years. Natalie, this is for you. Natalie would come into the shop every day we had shop with her yellow Crocs. The first time I saw them, I'm looking at them, oh no, what do I do with this? I'm sure she doesn't have any other shoes here. So then we get into this dilemma. So we talked a bit, and probably against my better judgment, I let her wear them. Technically, her foot is kind of covered. So anyway, she wore them. And Natalie has a wonderful sense of humor. So we would joke around about those things, and eventually we came up with the idea that she should market those as shop crocs and make millions. And we even came up with a little bit of a marketing agreement between the two of us for that. So Natalie, thank you. Anyway, just another little aside here. Natalie wrote a really touching letter to me as I retired last year, and I posted in my shop here because as I get deeper into my retirement, I want to remember the wonderful students I worked with. So thank you, Natalie. Anyway, back to what we're doing. Hearing and dust protection. So now, these I'd say you need to discuss with your instructor. If you feel the need, if you're very, very sensitive or have allergies or whatever, and you need to wear a mask in the shop, that should maybe be a conversation between you and your doctor and the shop teacher, okay? And something could be arranged for you. I usually kept the standard COVID masks in my shop at all times anyway. The other thing is hearing protection. Now, sorry to step out of frame there, but this is kind of what we used. And often these were basically used with people that had really sensitive hearing, or often my special students would come in and were a little bit afraid of the shop, and the noise is what got them. So this helped deaden the sound a little bit and allowed them to work in the shop a little more comfortably. So make sure that you're always keeping your healthcare needs in focus when you are suiting up to get into the shop. If you're an enthusiast, if you're a shop teacher, make sure that your kids have the necessary gear to keep them safe in the shop. My goal as an ex-shop teacher now is to promote teaching industrial arts as much as I can, as my concern is that these programs may not be around in a number of years. So let's keep it safe, let's keep everybody happy, and remember, your students are your first concern. All right, let's see. Oh, a couple of other things, yes. Jewelry. So if you're wearing rings, bracelets, necklaces, whatever they're called, if you wear them, I would encourage you not to in the shop. If you're wearing a necklace and you bend over something that's dangling there, like especially a lei that could get caught up, and at minimal it would ruin your jewelry. At worst, you'd end up with your nose rubbing against your turning piece, which would be funny for the others if you were okay. But tuck them in. If you have a necklace, throw it into your shirt. Rings, take them off, put them in your pocket. Bracelets, if you can get them in your pocket, great. But I would get rid of them for when I was in shop class. If you're an enthusiast, make a little bowl in your shop where you can put your things in and then pick them up at the end. Okay, that's important. Things can happen. And last but not least, one thing that I prohibited in the shop when I ran it was listening to things off your phone through your earbuds. And students would tell me that, oh no, Mr. Friesen, I can hear with, these are noise canceling. I'm pretty sure the only noise they canceled was my voice. So I would encourage you not to wear them. Usually shop classes are an hour. You can do without your tunes for an hour. Now, if you're an enthusiast and you're working in your shop by yourself, you could put the radio, what's a radio? You could plug your iPhone into a speaker and you can listen, that's no problem. The difference is there isn't somebody watching you and wanting to step in if you're doing something incorrectly. And if you can't hear your instructor when he commands something or she commands something from across the shop, you're not very safe anymore. So make sure that you put your tunes on hold for the hour. Okay, so now you're in the shop, you're dressed properly, and we're going to start working with the bandsaw itself. So there's also a few things you need to do on the bandsaw before you get permission from your teacher to cut. And one of those things is First of all, I always encouraged, actually didn't encourage, it was a rule in our shop, to wear a face shield. Now, you wear a face shield and your safety glasses, which maybe is a little bit overkill, but it protects your face. And I found that students when they're just learning to use a bandsaw, if all of a sudden there were little chips of wood that flew up and hit them in the face, they were very sensitive to that, and it distracted them. So we put face shields on. The other thing you need to make sure of, and in a school shop this will be taken care of for you, your wood needs to be clean, new, and free from debris like nails. And you know, if you have your storage bin outside and you drag it across the gravel, you're going to have little pits of rock in here. When you cut that with a bandsaw, you're going to dull the blade, which is not a good thing. So what I'm going to do now is we've got your face shield on. We're going to talk about things as I start going through the cut with you, okay? So the first thing we're going to cut today, we're going to do a rip cut. And a rip cut is cutting along the grain like that. That's what we're going to do first. That's one of your more common cuts. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the push pad. We'll use that later. And this is all my test wood from my rehearsals. Okay, the other thing I should introduce you to right away is push sticks, and a technique that I used with students for push sticks. So what frustrated me is, especially on the table saw, students are in the middle of a cut. This didn't happen very often, but they're in the middle of a cut, and all of a sudden they realize they need the push sticks, and then they go looking for them because, of course, the last person didn't put them back where they should be. And they leave the saw on. That's really dangerous. So I came up with a technique, I think I did anyway, who knows. But I have a technique that I refer to as palming my push sticks. So what I'm doing with that is I'm holding the push stick in my palm and using my fingers to control the wood. That can be very helpful, especially with long boards. You know, you can't use this push stick right away because, you know, you have to watch where you use a push stick because you don't want something like that happening. So I palmed my push sticks, and that worked really good. My students learned how to do this. So, okay, so when you're setting up, what I would get the students to do before they got my permission to use a saw is I would make all the adjustments. I would get them to make all the adjustments. So I'm going to set this, and this should be about a 1/4 inch above the board, 6 millimeters, which that's about it right there. Now, to set the width that you want to rip, on most of the projects that I did, especially with grade 8 students, we worked off of templates. So the templates would go in here, they'd slide the fence up to the template and lock it, and away we went. That was really easy. A lot of bandsaws have a rule on the rail, which you can use, and if it's accurate, that's wonderful. Mine actually came off on this side. I need to replace that. The other thing that you can use, and I don't seem to have one here, is a tape measure. So you can measure to your cut and do it that way. We usually left about a 1/16 extra so that you could plane that edge after it was cut. All right? Okay, so I'm not going to wear my face shield because the sound, it messes up the sound. And I'm going to just start. I'm going to get rid of this push stick here. And I'm going to go through what I would have had students do before they turned the switch on. So their face shield's on, their push sticks are in their hand, the upper guide is set, the fence is set, and I think we're ready to go. Then what the students would have done is said, hey, Mr. Friesen, can I use a saw? And I would have looked. And this is why I like that permission thing. Because I would look at the saw and I would look for all the things I mentioned. Face shield, push sticks, fence, upper guide. And then I could see that from a long distance away, and I'd say, yes, go ahead, especially when they were more competent on the saw. And then I would get them, they could turn the saw on, and on their push sticks, these are a little short, stand out of the direction or out of the line of the blade, and then okay, a couple of things there. You'll notice as I got the piece past the blade, my push stick in my right hand went behind the blade. That's important. If you push from this side like that, often what happens is this piece is going to kind of wheelie out like that, and you're going to have a little curve at the end of your piece. So for quality control issues, move this stick behind the blade once you get to the, once this stick is on the table. Okay, that makes sense. The other thing that I should mention is, right now we had the fence on the left side of the blade. So when I do things, when I'm working with the fence on the left side of the blade, and I'm doing that primarily for video, I would stand on the right side. I have worked in the shop my whole life. I have learned never to stand in line with a cutting action. Okay, it's not as big a deal on a bandsaw, but table saw, grindstones, all those things, always stand a little bit off to the side. It's just a good habit to get into. Now you can have this fence on the right side of the blade, and then it's the opposite. So then I'm standing on the left side of the blade, and I'm pushing with my right hand through and my left hand as guide. Okay? So that is a rip cut. And look at how nice and straight that is. That's an awesome cut. You can do amazing work with a bandsaw once it's set right and you know what you're doing. Okay, the next cut we're going to make, I wish I had my magnets on here because that's just a great place to put them. The next cut we're going to make is a cross cut. For the cross cut, we use the miter gauge. Now a cross cut is cutting a piece to length. We're cutting across the grain, okay? And the way I would do this is I would just take a tape measure, measure what I wanted, make a mark, or take a pattern, make it flush on the end, mark the end. Now I had students, for example, when we were doing table legs, and they're all the same length, and their rough cuts were all the same, they'd want to just take and use the fence and set it and then just cut that end off without measuring. Well, there I would invoke the table saw rule where you should never use a fence and a miter gauge at the same time. In my view, what I was trying to do is prepare students for not just using the bandsaw, but for other tools as well. So I never let that happen. So we've got that set up. I'm just going to use that mark, and we're going to line up the mark, and then, Mr. Friesen, can I cut? Get permission. Turn this on. Left hand on the handle, right hand is your clamp. Okay, and again, if your miter gauge is set square, I don't have a square here, but to me that looks pretty good. So again, can be a very accurate tool. Okay, so we've covered rip and cross cut. Those are going to be very common cuts that you're going to make. I would just add one thing. In order to use a cross cut or a miter gauge successfully on a bandsaw, in my opinion, the blade has to be cutting parallel to the slot. And again, maybe a setup video is in order for that. All right, so the next cut is a freehand cut. Now, this is the one that frustrated my students the most. because at the beginning especially, they just react a little too slowly. But that's just practice. That's all it is. So now the other thing here is remember your 2-inch radius all the way around. You don't want to put your hands in there. Now, one thing that you can do safely is put your hand behind the blade. Now, but still you're gonna get fairly close to the blade, and you really, really, really want to watch that. So keep your hands far away. Push sticks are an option, but some people would find something like this a little more difficult. So luckily this piece is big enough for the demonstration that I'm just going to cut it freehand, because I can be outside my 2 inches with my hands on the corners here. So, okay, so again, permission, hit switch. Okay, I don't know if you guys noticed that. One of the things we should probably discuss is what kind of radiuses you can cut with the type of blade you have in your saw. Now this is a 1/4-inch blade, and by the textbook, you can cut a 1/4-inch, a 3/4-inch radius circle, so 1.5 inches across. Now, did you hear it? Because I noticed it. When I came and I turned a little bit too sharp at the end, and I noticed a change in the noise of the saw. And what that change was, is the blade was impacting the front of this bearing and the back of the other bearing. So I had pushed the blade to its maximum clearances. And that isn't a good thing. So, and that isn't much of a cut, much of a radius. So yeah, be careful when you're cutting circles and radiuses with your saw, because you don't want to make it so the blade touches the left side of the kerf and the right side of the kerf at the same time. That's not a great thing. Okay, but anyway, not bad. Okay, let's move on. So we've covered the 3 basic cuts. Those are what 99% of people using the bandsaw will use, especially at the lower levels in a shop class. But there is one thing I want to show you yet, and that is resawing. So just as a review, we did a rip cut. That was cutting with the grain. We did a cross cut. That was cutting across the grain to length. Now we're going to do what's referred to as resawing. We're going to cut this material this way. Now, why would you do that? Well, I can answer that. We were noted in our area for building acoustic guitars. We built lots of skateboard, lots of longboards, and things that we needed to make veneer for. So we would often resaw birch pieces. So for example, the blank for a skateboard was 36 inches long, 3 inches, so 12 quarter-stock, 3/4 wide, and about 9 inches tall. And we would cut 1/8-inch veneers off of that, and then take them to the thickness sander and finish them to a 1/16, and then glue them up and put them in the press, and we'd have a board. So resawing became very important in our shop. Now, in the early days of our resawing, this is the saw that we use. I actually purchased this from the shop. So I put a 1/2-inch blade in here, and it has a riser block in it, but it only has a 1-horse motor. And a 1-horse motor is a little light for resawing. My students had to be very good, very consistent with their feed rate. And to their credit, they all did it. Some faster than others. And yeah, there were a few that I helped because we were running out of time. But in essence, all of them could do it. Once the shop equipment was upgraded in the latter years of my career, a slightly bigger horsepower saw made a huge difference. So I think that saw was a 1 3/4 horse. But for my resawing here, I have a General International saw, an 18-inch saw with a 3-horse motor. So that is adequate. I have a 1-inch blade in there. That's more of a heavier duty resaw setup. So if you can afford that in your shop, if you're doing resawing, that's a great way to go. If you can't, this would work. Okay, let's get started. So now I have to find my 1/4 inch above the stock again. That would do it. Okay, and then we're going to set the fence, and I'm just going to roughly set this. That's about 1/8 on the bottom. Okay, now to feed this through, I would use 1 push pad and 1 push stick. So I usually like to use pads in conjunction with a stick because a stick usually allows you to control the end, whereas a pad, this type of pad doesn't. Now you can get pads, and your shop may have them, that hook onto the end and provide more control, but I just use a stick. And remember, these are free. It could be your first bandsaw project. Okay, so I'm going to put this up against the fence like that. I'm going to supply good pressure against the fence. Okay? And I'm not leaning into it to push the saw over, but very firm. Okay, and then I'd get permission again, and I'd press start. And okay, there it is. Boy, that pine resaws easily. Okay, so that basically brings the demonstration of the bandsaw to an end today. You'll notice I didn't necessarily follow all the rules on the sheet. No, I should rephrase that. I didn't go through each one of the rules on the sheet individually, because I thought it was more important today to show the cut part of it. This is something, if you have the poster on your tool like this, you can read this at any time. And I would encourage you to do that when you're waiting for your teacher to give you the go-ahead to cut. Look at your sheet, refresh your memory, okay? Well, that brings the demo to a close today. Remember that please like, share, subscribe. Right now I think I'm somewhere around 20 subscribers, so that kind of gets the relatives and family maybe out of the way. So if you feel this content is beneficial to you or beneficial to others, please like, share, and subscribe. It's important, I think, that this message continues to get out. We need to bring new woodworkers, new shop people into this field, and it's just important that when you're in the shop, that you're doing things safely. So,